The Grand Assembly Chamber of the Galactic Concordance had witnessed 10,000 years of deliberations, treaties, declarations of war, and proclamations of peace. Its crystalline walls had absorbed the weighted words of emperors and the desperate pleas of dying civilizations. The 17 founding species had carved their histories into its very architecture, and the subsequent 243 member species had added their own contributions over the millennia. But never, in all its storied existence, had the chamber fallen into such complete and utter silence as it did on the day the human child arrived.
High Counselor Vethnar of the Kethrani adjusted his sensory membrane, certain that his aged organs were malfunctioning. The Kethrani were ancient, their civilization predating most others in the Concordance by several thousand years. They had evolved beyond many of the primitive emotional responses that plagued younger species. They prided themselves on logic, on measured responses, on the careful calculation of every action and reaction. And yet, as Vethnar observed the small creature that had somehow materialized in the center of the assembly chamber, he felt something stir within him that his species had not experienced in generations. Fear.
"What is the meaning of this?" demanded Counselor Srix of the Venari, her serpentine body coiling tighter around her ceremonial perch. The humans were not scheduled to present before this body for another 17 rotations, and they were to send their ambassador, not whatever this is.
The whatever this is in question stood approximately 1 meter tall. Small even by human standards, Vethnar recalled from his briefings. It was dressed in a strange, soft garment covered in images of what appeared to be primitive flying machines and explosive stellar phenomena. The creature's face was round, marked by 2 startlingly large eyes that seemed to take in everything around it with an intensity that made several counselors physically recoil.
"I'm Lily," the creature announced, its voice high-pitched and carrying a quality that Vethnar's translation matrix struggled to process. "I'm 6.5 years old. Where's my mommy?"
The translation matrix rendered the words, but something in the tone, something in the vibration of the small vocal cords created a resonance that rippled through the chamber. Several of the more sensitive species immediately activated their personal shields. "A juvenile," breathed Counselor Met-Tech of the Praxian Collective, his 4 compound eyes blinking in rapid succession. "They have sent a juvenile among us. This is an act of war." "Don't be ridiculous," snapped Counselor Yenna of the Trilithian hegemony, though her luminescent skin had noticeably dimmed, a sure sign of distress in her species. "The humans would not be so foolish. There must be some explanation." Emergency protocols activated across the chamber. Holographic barriers shimmered into existence. Security drones descended from their concealed alcoves in the ceiling. The great doors sealed with a resonant clang that echoed off the crystalline walls. Through it all, the human child, Lily, stood in the center of the chamber, looking around with an expression that the translation matrices uniformly struggled to interpret. Some rendered it as curiosity. Others suggested confusion. A few, operating on older algorithms, returned the troubling result of wonder. "Your walls are pretty," Lily said, reaching out to touch the nearest crystalline pillar. "They look like the inside of my kaleidoscope." The pillar she touched was a memorial to the 3 billion Kethrani who had perished in the Silence Wars. It had been constructed with the final breath of their species' most revered spiritual leader, its internal structure said to contain the essence of their souls. When the child's small hand made contact with its surface, something happened that had never occurred in the 10,000 years since its creation. It sang.
A note, pure and clear, resonated through the chamber. It was a sound that the Kethrani had believed they would never hear again, the harmonic frequency of their lost homeworld, a planet that had been consumed by its dying sun 3,000 years ago.
Vethnar's sensory membrane seized. Around him, the other Kethrani representatives collapsed into their ceremonial positions of profound reverence. For a moment, just a moment,
They could hear the wind whistling through the crystal canyons of Kethra Prime.
"It sings!" Lily exclaimed, delighted. She tapped the pillar again, producing another note. "Listen, it's like the piano at Grandma's house, but prettier." She began to tap a rhythm, her small fingers moving with the uncoordinated enthusiasm of youth. Each touch produced another note, and soon the chamber was filled with a melody that seemed to shift and change with each passing second.
It was chaos. It was beautiful. It was absolutely terrifying.
Ambassador Helena Zhang was mid-briefing with her senior staff when her personal communicator began flashing the pattern that indicated a Priority 1 emergency from the Concordance security apparatus.
Ambassador Zhang, the voice on the other end was that of Security Chief Kavor of the Mantid hierarchy, a being renowned for its calm demeanor even in the most trying circumstances. Right now, it sounded like it was on the verge of what humans might call a nervous breakdown. "We have a situation."
"Define situation," Helena said, already rising from her seat. "There is a juvenile human in the Grand Assembly Chamber. It arrived approximately 15 standard minutes ago. We don't know how. Our security measures are comprehensive."
Helena's blood ran cold. Describe the juvenile.
"Small, approximately 1 meter in height. Brownish head fibers, large visual organs. It is wearing a garment decorated with images of—"
"Aircraft and stars," Helena whispered.
"Yes. How did you—"
"That's my daughter."
The silence on the other end of the communication stretched for precisely 2 seconds, which was an eternity for a mantid. "Your offspring? The ambassador's offspring is in the Grand Assembly Chamber? How?"
Helena was already moving, gesturing for her security detail to follow. "I don't know, but I'm on my way. Keep everyone calm. Keep my daughter safe, and for the love of everything you hold sacred, don't let anyone hurt her."
"Ambassador, with respect, the concern at this moment is not for your daughter's safety. It is for the safety of the Council."
Helena stopped walking. "Explain."
She has made the Pillar of Souls sing. The Kethrani delegation is in a state of profound spiritual upheaval. The Venari are convinced this is an assassination attempt using methods we cannot comprehend. The Praxian Collective is demanding immediate military mobilization. And your daughter is currently—
"Currently what?"
"Playing, Ambassador. She is playing, and nothing we do seems to stop her."
She had been scared at first. One moment she had been in her room at the embassy, playing with her favorite toy, a gift from her grandmother that was supposed to be a simple kaleidoscope, but was actually, unbeknownst to everyone, an artifact of the precursor race that had seeded life throughout the galaxy 3 billion years ago. The next moment, the kaleidoscope had gotten really warm, the light inside it had gotten really bright, and then she was somewhere else. Somewhere big, somewhere strange. Somewhere filled with monsters.
Except they weren't really monsters, were they? Lily knew about aliens. Her mommy worked with aliens. Some of them looked scary, but her mommy had always told her that looking scary didn't mean being scary. Mr. Whiskers at the pet store looked scary with his big teeth and his mean eyes, but he was actually very nice and liked to have his belly rubbed.
Maybe these aliens were the same way.
So Lily had decided not to be scared. And when she wasn't scared, she noticed that the room was actually very pretty. The walls were made of something that looked like the crystal formations at the museum, but bigger and more colorful, and when she touched them, they made sounds.
The big aliens were making a lot of noise, talking in their strange languages that her mommy's translator device turned into words she could understand. But they seemed upset about something, and Lily didn't want them to be upset. When she was upset, her mommy would sing to her, or play games with her, or let her run around until she felt better.
So she ran.
The floor was amazing. It was perfectly smooth, like the ice rink, but it wasn't cold and it wasn't slippery. Her shoes made the best noises on it. Squeak, squeak, squeak.
Around and around the central area she went, arms outstretched, making airplane noises that her mommy always said were too loud for inside, but that she couldn't help making because flying was the best.
"Meow," she announced, tilting to one side as she rounded a corner. "I'm a spaceship, a really fast spaceship. Zoom, zoom, zoom." Above her, the security drones tracked her movement with increasing confusion. Their threat assessment algorithms kept returning error codes. The juvenile was not attacking. The juvenile was not fleeing. The juvenile was not attempting to communicate in any meaningful way. The juvenile was simply running.
And making sounds. So many sounds.
The Praxian collective's representatives, whose species communicated primarily through precisely modulated sonic frequencies, were experiencing what could only be described as sensory overload. Each vocalization from the tiny human was a chaotic storm of frequencies, high, low, oscillating, piercing, all delivered with an apparently bottomless reservoir of energy.
"Make it stop," begged Collective Prime Matek, his compound eyes squeezed shut in a futile attempt to block out the assault. "Please, in the name of the unified vibration, make it stop."
Counselor Yenna of the Trilithian hegemony was faring no better. Her species was exquisitely sensitive to emotional resonances, able to detect and interpret the psychological states of others through minute fluctuations in their bioelectric fields. It was what made the Trilithians such accomplished diplomats.
It was also what was currently causing Yenna to question whether she would survive this experience with her sanity intact. The child's emotional output was overwhelming was an insufficient word. Tsunami would be more accurate. Each second brought a new wave, excitement crashing against the shores of her consciousness, followed immediately by curiosity, then wonder, then something that might be joy or might be chaos incarnate. It was impossible to tell because the child's emotions refused to settle into any recognizable pattern.
"This is not possible," Yenna gasped, her luminescent skin flickering through the entire visible spectrum. "Nothing living should be able to feel this much, this fast. Is this what humans are? How do they survive their own existence?"
Syrinx of the Venari had slithered as far from the running child as her position permitted, her hood fully extended in a defensive display that her species had not needed to deploy in over 1,000 years. "I am beginning to understand," she hissed, "why the preliminary reports on humans classified them as potential Class 7 threat entities."
"Class 7?" asked the representative from the Jovian Philosopher's Enclave, a being that existed primarily as a complex pattern of magnetic fields. "But they have barely achieved interstellar capability. Their technology is primitive by our standards. Their military might is negligible."
It was not their technology or their military that concerned the classification committee, Syrinx replied. It was their biology, their psychology, their... She paused, searching for the right word. Their intensity.
As if to underscore her point, Lily chose that moment to stop running and instead attempt a cartwheel.
She was not very good at cartwheels. She was, in fact, spectacularly bad at cartwheels. Her first attempt resulted in a sideways tumble that ended with her flat on her back on the floor, staring up at the domed ceiling of the chamber.
Any other species' child would have been hurt. Any other species' child would have been frightened. Any other species' child would have learned from this failure and not attempted the action again.
Lily laughed.
The sound echoed through the chamber, bouncing off the crystalline walls and multiplying into a symphony of pure, unbridled amusement. It was a sound that spoke of resilience, of joy found in failure, of an indomitable spirit that refused to be diminished by setback or circumstance.
And then she got up and tried again. The Jovian philosopher's magnetic field actually fluctuated, a phenomenon that was supposed to be impossible for beings of its composition. It fell, it was damaged, and it is attempting the same action again. This is unprecedented.
"They do that," Vethna said quietly.
He had recovered somewhat from the spiritual upheaval caused by the singing pillar, though his sensory membrane still tingled with the echoes of his lost homeworld song. I have studied the preliminary reports. Humans do not learn from failure in the way that other species do. They do not adapt to avoid pain. They adapt to endure it.
But why? The philosopher asked. Vethnar watched as the child tumbled again, laughed again, and rose again. I do not know, and I fear that understanding the answer to that question may be the key to understanding everything about this species.
Lily was getting tired. Not physically tired. She could run and play for hours before that kind of tired set in. This was a different kind of tired. She was tired of being alone. She was tired of the big aliens staying so far away from her. She was tired of not knowing where her mommy was.
She sat down in the center of the chamber, cross-legged, the way her teacher had taught her to sit during story time. The aliens had gotten quiet again, watching her with their many different kinds of eyes. Some of them looked scared. Some of them looked confused. A few of them looked sad. Lily didn't like when people looked sad.
"Do you want to hear a story?" she asked.
Her voice, no longer raised in play, still carried through the chamber. The translation matrices went to work, converting her words into the hundreds of languages represented in the room. There was no response. The aliens simply stared.
I know lots of stories, Lily continued, undeterred. My mommy reads them to me every night, and my grandma tells me stories from when she was little, and my daddy used to tell me stories too, before he went away.
Something in her voice shifted when she mentioned her father. The Trilithian counselor, Yenna, actually gasped as the wave of emotion washed over her. Grief, raw and ancient by human child standards, but fresh enough to still carry edges.
Daddy told the best stories, Lily said. He made up voices for all the characters, and sometimes he would act them out and be silly and make me laugh so hard my tummy hurt.
She was quiet for a moment, looking down at her hands.
I miss him.
In the span of those two words, the entire dynamic of the chamber shifted. The fear did not vanish. It was still there, lurking in the instinctive responses of species that had learned over millions of years to be wary of the unknown. But something else crept in alongside it, something that transcended the boundaries of biology and culture.
Empathy.
The Praxian collective was not known for emotional intelligence. They were a hive species, their individual identities subsumed into the greater whole. The concept of personal loss was foreign to them. When one drone perished, the collective remained. There was no grief because there was no true separation.
And yet, Collective Prime Matek found himself speaking before he realized he intended to. Where did your father go?
Lily looked up at the strange insectoid creature. To heaven, she said. Mommy says it's a place where people go when their bodies stop working. She says Daddy is watching over me from there, and that he's not hurting anymore.
Hurting?
He was sick for a long time. Mommy didn't tell me at first because she didn't want me to be scared, but I knew something was wrong. Daddy stopped playing with me as much. He stopped being able to carry me on his shoulders. He stopped being able to stay awake during our stories.
The child's voice remained steady, relating facts with the matter-of-fact quality that only children possess. But beneath the words, the emotions churned, grief and love and confusion, and a desperate, aching need to understand something that no being, regardless of age or species, had ever truly understood.
Mommy says that everyone dies eventually. She says that's what makes our time together so precious. She says we have to love each other as much as we can, for as long as we can, because we never know when we might not be able to anymore.
Yenna of the Trilithians was openly weeping, her luminescent tears leaving trails of soft blue light down her face. This was not weakness. Trilithians considered the display of emotion to be the highest form of communication, far more honest than mere words. The fact that she could not control her response spoke to the overwhelming nature of what she was receiving from the child.
Your species, she managed to say, her voice trembling, knows from birth that you will die?
Everybody knows that, Lily said, tilting her head in confusion. Don't you know that?
We do, but we do not think about it. We do not dwell upon it. We accept it as a distant certainty and continue our existence without allowing it to influence our decisions.
That sounds sad.
Yenna blinked. It is not. It is logical. It is healthy. It allows us to function without the burden of existential dread.
But if you don't think about dying, Lily said, with the devastating simplicity of childhood wisdom, how do you remember to live?
The silence that followed was different from the silences that had come before. This was not the silence of fear or confusion or defensive caution. This was the silence of beings confronted with a truth so fundamental that they had somehow managed to overlook it for millennia. It was High Counselor Vethnar who finally broke it.
Tell us a story, he said, his voice carrying a tremor that no Kethrani had exhibited in centuries. One that your father told you.
Lily's face brightened. Really? You want to hear a story?
Yes, please. And so, in the center of the most powerful deliberative body in the galaxy, surrounded by the representatives of species that commanded fleets of thousands and controlled resources beyond human comprehension, a 6.5-year-old girl began to tell a story about a rabbit who wanted to be brave.
Once upon a time, Lily began, settling into the rhythms that countless bedtime stories had ingrained in her, there was a little rabbit named Rosie. She lived in a nice burrow with her mommy and daddy and 3 brothers and 2 sisters.
The translation matrices worked overtime, converting the concepts into frameworks that each species could understand. For the Venari, a burrow became a nest cave. For the Praxian collective, the family unit was rendered as a microhive. For the Kethrani, the rabbit became a small furred creature analogous to the beloved Kthri of their lost world home.
Rosie was the smallest rabbit in her family, Lily continued. She had the shortest ears and the shortest legs and the quietest voice. Her brothers and sisters could run really fast and jump really high and dig really deep, but Rosie couldn't do any of those things as well as they could.
Several counselors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was beginning to sound uncomfortably familiar. Because she was the smallest, Rosie was also the most scared. She was scared of the owl who lived in the big tree. She was scared of the fox who prowled the edge of the forest. She was scared of the big dogs who belonged to the farmer, and the farmer's big boots, and the rumbling of the farmer's big machine. Her brothers and sisters weren't scared of any of those things, or at least they pretended not to be. They would go out and play in the meadow while Rosie stayed in the burrow, watching from the entrance, too afraid to join them.
One day, Rosie's daddy found her sitting by herself, and he asked her what was wrong. Rosie said she wanted to be brave like her brothers and sisters, but she didn't know how. She said that bravery seemed like something you had to be born with, like long ears or strong legs, and she just wasn't born with it.
Vethnar found himself leaning forward. The story was simple, clearly designed for a young audience, but there was something in it that resonated with concerns he had not allowed himself to examine in a very long time.
Rosie's daddy sat down next to her, and he said something that Rosie never forgot. He said, "Bravery isn't about not being scared. Bravery is about being scared and doing the thing anyway."
Lily paused, and her voice shifted, deepening slightly as she channeled the memory of her father. "You think your brothers and sisters aren't afraid? They're terrified. Every single time they go out into the meadow, they're afraid. The difference is that they've learned to make friends with their fear. They've learned to say, 'Hello, fear, I see you there. Thanks for trying to keep me safe. But I've got something I need to do today, so why don't you come along and watch?'"
Rosie didn't understand at first. How could you make friends with fear? Fear was cold and heavy and made your heart beat too fast. Fear was uncomfortable. Fear was not something you wanted to be friends with.
But her daddy just smiled and said, "Try it. Next time you're scared, don't try to make the fear go away. Just acknowledge it, accept it, and then do the thing you're scared of anyway. You might be surprised at what happens."
Lily shifted position, her legs starting to go numb from sitting cross-legged on the hard floor. So the next day, when Rosie's brothers and sisters went out to play in the meadow, Rosie went with them. She was scared, really, really scared. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might pop out of her chest. Her legs were shaking so much she could barely hop.
But she remembered what her daddy said. And instead of trying to make the fear go away, she said, "Hello, fear. I see you there. Thanks for trying to keep me safe, but I've got something I need to do today, so why don't you come along and watch?"
And do you know what happened?
She looked around the chamber, her eyes meeting the eyes, or eye analogs, of dozens of alien beings. None of them responded. They were too captivated.
The fear didn't go away. It stayed right there with her the whole time. But somehow, having acknowledged it, having accepted it, having invited it to come along rather than trying to push it away, it didn't feel as heavy anymore. It was still there, but it was more like a passenger than a driver. Rosie played in the meadow with her brothers and sisters. She was still the slowest, and she still couldn't jump as high or dig as deep, but she was there. She was doing it, and even though she was scared the whole time, she had never felt more alive. From that day forward, Rosie made a practice of making friends with her fear. Every time she felt scared, she would acknowledge it, accept it, and then do the thing anyway. Sometimes the things she did turned out fine. Sometimes they turned out badly. But no matter what happened, she always felt proud of herself for having tried. And over time, something magical happened. Rosie realized that she wasn't the smallest anymore. She had grown big and strong without even noticing. And she wasn't the most scared anymore either. Or maybe she was still scared just as often, but it didn't matter as much because she knew that being scared didn't have to mean being stopped. Years later, when Rosie was a grown-up rabbit with her own children, they came to her and asked her the same question she had once asked her father. How do we become brave?
And Rosie smiled, and she said the same thing her daddy had said to her. Bravery isn't about not being scared. Bravery is about being scared and doing the thing anyway. So make friends with your fear, invite it along for the ride, and then go do what you need to do.
Lily finished her story with the traditional words her father had always used, and Rosie and her children lived happily and bravely for the rest of their days. The end. The Grand Assembly Chamber was completely silent. 260 species, representing trillions upon trillions of individuals across the galaxy, sat in absolute stillness. And then, softly at first, but building in intensity, something began to happen. The Kethrani started to hum, a low, resonant sound that seemed to emerge from the very depths of their being. It was a sound of profound spiritual significance, used only when a truth had been spoken that touched the deepest core of their philosophy. The Trilithians joined in, their voices weaving harmonics through the Kethrani drone. Their luminescent skin began to pulse in synchronized patterns, each flicker representing an emotion they had not known they were capable of feeling in the presence of another species. The Praxian collective added their own contribution, a complex percussion of clicks and whistles that normally served as their battle hymn, but was now repurposed into something entirely different, something that spoke not of war, but of unity. One by one, species after species added their voices to the growing chorus. The Venari contributed a sibilant susurration. The Mantid clicked their mandibles in precisely timed bursts. Even the Jovian philosopher, a being of pure magnetic fields, contributed by modulating its energy patterns in ways that the other species could feel rather than hear. Lily sat in the center of this symphony, her eyes wide with wonder. Is that for me?
No, child, said High Counselor Vethnar, his voice thick with an emotion his species had believed themselves incapable of. That is for your father, for giving you the words that reminded us of something we had forgotten.
What did you forget? That fear is not weakness. That vulnerability is not failure. that the bravest thing any being can do is not to conquer their fear, but to acknowledge it and continue forward anyway.
Vethnar rose from his ceremonial seat, something that no High Counselor had done in the presence of a non-member species in over 3,000 years, and descended the steps toward where Lily sat.
"We have spent millennia," he said, "developing technologies to eliminate fear. We have engineered our bodies to suppress it. We have created philosophies to deny it. We believed this made us strong. We believed this made us wise."
He stopped before the child, lowering himself to her level with a grace that belied his advanced age. But in our quest to escape fear, we also escaped something else. We escaped the courage that can only exist in response to fear. We escaped the growth that can only come from confronting what frightens us. We escaped the profound beauty of choosing to act despite uncertainty.
"You're really old," Lily said. "Like, really, really old."
A sound emerged from Vethnar that the translation matrices struggled to process. It was eventually rendered as laughter, the first time laughter had been recorded in Mekathrani in over 400 years.
"Yes, child, I am really, really old, and in all my years I have never been as frightened as I was when you first appeared in this chamber."
"I'm sorry, Lily," said, her face falling. "I didn't mean to scare you. The kaleidoscope just got really bright, and then I was here, and—"
"No, no," Vethnar interrupted gently. "I am grateful for the fear. I had forgotten what it felt like. I had forgotten that to feel fear is to feel alive. I had forgotten that the universe is vast and strange and full of wonders, and that wonder and terror are sometimes the same thing, wearing different masks." He reached out, and after a moment's hesitation, touched the top of Lily's head in the gesture of benediction that his species reserved for their most sacred occasions. "Thank you, Lily of the human species. You have given this council a gift beyond measure. You have reminded us that we are not yet finished learning, that we are not yet finished growing, that no matter how ancient and wise we believe ourselves to be, there is always more to discover."
Ambassador Helena Zhang arrived at the Grand Assembly Chamber to find her worst fears and her wildest hopes both simultaneously manifested before her eyes.
The great doors stood open, another first in the chamber's history. Beyond them, she could see the representatives of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations gathered in a loose circle around a small figure that was demonstrating what appeared to be the proper technique for blowing raspberries.
"And you just go like that," Lily was explaining, sticking out her tongue between her lips and expelling air in the most undignified sound Helena had ever heard in a diplomatic setting. "It's really fun. You try."
The fact that 17 different species were genuinely attempting to replicate this sound, with varying degrees of success, would have been enough to short-circuit Helena's understanding of interstellar politics, but it was Vethnar's expression that truly broke her mind.
The High Counselor of the Kathrani, the most powerful individual in the known galaxy, was smiling.
Kathrani didn't smile. Their facial anatomy wasn't even supposed to permit it, and yet there it was, a clear curving of his sensory membrane that could only be interpreted as genuine amusement.
"Mommy!"
Lily spotted her mother and was across the chamber before Helena could react, slamming into her legs with enough force to nearly knock her over. Helena scooped her daughter up, holding her tight, letting the fear and relief wash over her in equal measure.
"I was so worried about you," Helena whispered into Lily's hair. "When they told me you were here, I don't know what I thought. Are you okay? Did anyone hurt you?"
"I'm fine, Mommy. I made friends. The big bug person is really nice once you get to know him, and the snake lady gave me a special necklace, and the glowy person taught me a song, and—"
"Slow down, sweetie. One thing at a time."
Ambassador Jean. Helena looked up to find High Counselor Vethnar approaching. She instinctively tightened her grip on Lily, every diplomatic instinct screaming that she was about to face consequences for this unprecedented breach of protocol.
High Counselor, she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. I apologize for this intrusion. I don't yet understand how my daughter came to be here, but I take full responsibility for—
Ambassador, Vethnar interrupted, his voice gentle. There is no need for apologies. What happened here today was not an intrusion. It was a gift.
Helena blinked. A gift?
Your daughter told us a story. A simple story about a rabbit who wanted to be brave. And in that story, she reminded us of something we had lost.
The High Counselor gestured around the chamber, where the other representatives had gathered in a loose semicircle, watching the exchange with expressions that ranged from contemplative to openly emotional.
We have grown old, Ambassador, so old that we had forgotten what it means to be young. We had forgotten the simple joys of discovery and play. We had forgotten that fear is not an enemy to be conquered, but a companion to be understood. We had forgotten that wisdom comes not only from great deeds and profound contemplations, but also from the simple truths that children understand instinctively.
Helena looked at her daughter, who was playing with the pendant that the Venari counselor had apparently given her, a carved scale from Srix's own body, an honor that Helena knew was reserved for the Venari's most revered allies.
What exactly happened here? Helena asked.
Many things, said Counselor Yenna, gliding forward on her locomotion field. Your daughter touched our most sacred artifacts and made them sing in ways they never have before. She ran through our halls, making sounds that our auditory specialists are still trying to classify. She performed physical movements that our kinesiologists have declared should be impossible for such a small body. She expressed emotions with an intensity that nearly overwhelmed every empath in the chamber.
And then she sat down and told us a bedtime story that has fundamentally altered our understanding of the nature of courage.
A busy afternoon, Helena said faintly.
Indeed, and that is not all.
Yenna's luminescent skin shifted to a soft gold, the color of profound respect. When your daughter first arrived, we were afraid of her. We activated our defenses. We prepared for attack. And yet, at no point did she respond to our fear with fear of her own. She chose curiosity over caution. She chose wonder over wariness. She chose to see us not as threats, but as potential friends.
That's just how she is, Helena said. She's always been open.
And therein lies the true gift, Ambassador. Your species is young. By our standards, you are barely more than children yourselves. And yet, in your openness, in your vulnerability, in your willingness to engage with the unknown despite your fear, you embody something that older species have lost along the way.
Vethnar stepped forward again. Ambassador Zong, the Galactic Concordance was prepared to debate human membership for another 17 rotations. There were concerns about your species' stability, your violent history, your unpredictable nature.
Many of us believed that humanity was too chaotic to be trusted with the responsibilities of galactic citizenship.
Helena braced herself. Here it came, the rejection she had been working to prevent for the past 3 years.
We were fools, Vethnar said.
Helena's jaw dropped. The chaos that your species embodies is not a flaw, it is a feature. The emotional intensity that we found so overwhelming is not a weakness, it is a strength that we had forgotten existed. The unpredictability that we feared is not dangerous, it is the engine of creativity and adaptation.
The High Counselor reached into his ceremonial robes and withdrew a small crystal sphere, the orb of accord, the symbol of membership in the Galactic Concordance. Helena had seen it in briefings. She had dreamed of one day seeing it in person. She had never imagined it would be placed directly into her hands.
On behalf of the High Council of the Galactic Concordance, Vethnar said, his voice carrying the weight of 10,000 years of tradition, I hereby extend full membership status to the species known as humanity. May your chaos bring us life. May your emotions remind us how to feel. May your stories teach us how to be brave.
Helena stared at the orb, speechless. In her arms, Lily reached out to touch its surface, and it began to glow with a soft, warm light.
Pretty, Lily said. Can we take it home?
Despite everything, despite the impossibility of the situation, despite the weight of what had just happened, despite the fact that her entire understanding of galactic politics had just been turned upside down, Helena laughed.
Yes, sweetie, she said, her voice thick with emotion. We can take it home. Later, after the ceremonies and the speeches and the seemingly endless rounds of congratulations, Helena finally had a chance to sit down with her daughter and ask the question that had been burning in her mind since this whole adventure began.
Lily, how did you get to the assembly chamber? They were in their quarters at the embassy, Lily freshly bathed and dressed in her pajamas, the pendant from Counselor Srix still hanging around her neck. She looked sleepy but still charged with the energy that seemed to be her permanent state.
The kaleidoscope, Lily said, as if this were the most obvious thing in the world.
Grandma's kaleidoscope? The one she gave you for your birthday?
Uh-huh. It got really bright and warm, and I could see all these pretty colors. And then I was somewhere else.
Helena retrieved the toy from where Lily had left it in her room. It looked like an ordinary kaleidoscope, a tube of brass and glass, clearly antique, but nothing remarkable. Her mother had found it at an estate sale years ago and had been oddly insistent that Lily have it.
Helena held it up to her eye and turned the end. The patterns shifted and reformed, just as they should in any ordinary kaleidoscope. Except,
there was something strange about the light, something that didn't quite match the physics of reflection and refraction. The colors seemed to move with a purpose, forming patterns that were almost meaningful before dissolving into chaos again.
Ambassador Jean.
Helena nearly dropped the kaleidoscope. In the doorway of her quarters stood a figure she didn't recognize, humanoid in shape, but composed entirely of shifting light, like a living kaleidoscope pattern.
Please don't be alarmed, the figure said, its voice resonating in a frequency that somehow bypassed her ears and registered directly in her mind. I mean you no harm. I am simply here to explain.
Who are you? How did you get in here?
I am a keeper, one of the last. As for how I got here, the same way your daughter traveled to the assembly chamber, through the lens. Helena looked at the kaleidoscope in her hand. This is precursor technology. Yes, one of our few remaining gifts to the younger species. We seeded life throughout this galaxy billions of years ago, and we have watched as that life grew and evolved and developed. We have been patient, waiting for signs that our children were ready.
Ready for what?
The keeper moved closer, and Helena could see that its form was not random. The patterns that comprised it were beautiful and complex, containing depths that her human mind could barely perceive.
Ready to be what they were always meant to be. Ready to lead. Ready to teach. Ready to remind the older species of what they have forgotten.
I don't understand.
The Galactic Concordance is ancient, Ambassador. So ancient that many of its members have lost touch with the essential truths that give existence meaning. They have conquered fear by eliminating their capacity to feel it. They have achieved peace by suppressing all emotion. They have attained wisdom by abandoning wonder.
The keeper's light shifted, forming a pattern that somehow conveyed sadness. We precursors made this same mistake once. We became so focused on transcendence that we forgot to live. By the time we realized our error, it was too late. We had evolved beyond the capacity to reclaim what we had lost.
And humans? What do we have to do with this? Your species is young, wild, chaotic. You feel everything with an intensity that older species find overwhelming. You fear and you love and you rage and you weep and you laugh, all with equal passion. You make mistakes and you learn, and you make the same mistakes again. You are gloriously, spectacularly imperfect.
The Keeper's form brightened, and that is precisely what the galaxy needs. The Concordance has forgotten how to feel. They have forgotten how to grow. They have forgotten how to truly live. They need a species that can remind them. They need a species that embodies everything they have lost.
They need us.
Yes, and today your daughter did exactly what she was meant to do. She showed them what they had forgotten. She reminded them that fear is not weakness, that chaos is not failure, that the messiness of existence is not a problem to be solved, but a gift to be embraced.
Helena looked down at Lily, who had fallen asleep on the couch while the adults talked, one hand still clutching the scale pendant. In sleep, her face was peaceful, innocent, utterly unaware of the cosmic significance of what she had accomplished.
Why, Lily? Helena asked. Why a child?
Because children are the purest expression of what a species truly is. They have not yet learned to hide their nature. They have not yet developed the masks that adults wear. When the Concordance looked at Lily, they saw humanity stripped of all pretense. They saw the raw, unfiltered essence of your species.
And what do they see?
The Keeper's form shifted one final time, composing itself into an image that Helena would never forget. A tiny rabbit, standing alone in a vast meadow, trembling with fear, but refusing to run. They saw bravery, the Keeper said. True bravery, not the absence of fear, but the presence of courage in the face of it. That is humanity's gift to the galaxy, Ambassador. That is what you were created to bring.
The Keeper began to fade, its light growing dimmer with each passing second. Raise your daughter well, Ambassador Zhang. Teach her the stories of your people. Help her understand the power she carries within her. Because she is not just a child anymore. She is a symbol, a reminder, a beacon.
Wait, Helena said. What about the kaleidoscope? Is it safe for her to use?
The lens will not transport her again. It served its purpose. Now it is simply a toy, a reminder of the day a human child frightened the most powerful beings in the galaxy and taught them how to live again.
The Keeper vanished, leaving behind only a faint shimmer in the air and an echo of its voice. Remember, Ambassador. Remember what it means to be human. Remember what it means to feel. Remember what it means to be afraid and to continue forward anyway. And teach the galaxy to remember too.
The Grand Assembly Chamber looked different now.
The crystalline walls still soared overhead, still bore the weight of 10,000 years of history. But the atmosphere had changed. Where once there had been rigid formality and carefully suppressed emotion, now there was something else, something looser, something more alive. High Counselor Vethnar stood at the central podium, addressing the assembled representatives. Behind him, a holographic display showed the changes that had swept through Concordance space over the past year.
When humanity joined our alliance, he said, we expected disruption. We expected challenges. We expected that their chaotic nature would cause problems that would take generations to resolve.
He paused, and the smile that had become his trademark spread across his features.
We did not expect what actually happened.
The hologram shifted, showing images from across the galaxy. Kithrani children, a concept that had been virtually extinct in their species for centuries, running through fields of crystal, their laughter echoing off the ancient spires. Venari families emerging from their isolation, joining communal celebrations for the first time in recorded history. Praxian drones engaging in individual expression, creating art and music that the collective had never imagined possible.
Humanity has been part of our alliance for one standard year. In that time, they have accomplished more than any species in our history.
He turned to look at the human delegation, where Ambassador Zhang sat with her daughter beside her. Lily was now 7.5 years old, dressed in formal attire, but still wearing the scale pendant that Counselor Srix had given her. She had been invited as a special guest of honor, the first child to ever attend a formal session of the assembly.
They have taught us to play. They have taught us to dream. They have taught us to fear and to love and to rage against injustice with a passion we had forgotten we possessed. They have taught us, in short, to live.
The assembly burst into applause, another innovation borrowed from human culture. It had taken months for some species to learn the appropriate rhythm, but now the sound filled the chamber with a warmth that would have been unthinkable a year ago.
When the applause died down, Vethnar continued. But perhaps the greatest lesson has come from the smallest teacher. Lily Zhang, would you join me at the podium?
Lily looked at her mother for permission. Helena nodded, squeezing her daughter's hand before releasing her. Lily walked to the podium with the self-conscious confidence of a child who had somehow grown accustomed to being the center of attention in rooms full of aliens.
1 year ago today, Vethnar said, this child stood in this very chamber and told us a story about a rabbit who wanted to be brave. That story changed us. It changed our laws, our customs, our entire understanding of what it means to be alive.
He turned to Lily. I understand you have a new story for us.
Lily nodded solemnly. My mommy helped me write it. It's about a butterfly and a flower.
Please, share it with us.
And so, for the second time in the history of the Galactic Concordance, the most powerful beings in the galaxy fell silent to listen to a child tell a story.
Epilogue: The Nature of Humanity.
The report was classified at the highest level, distributed only to the senior leadership of each member species. It had taken a year to compile, drawing on the expertise of philosophers, scientists, historians, and psychologists from across the galaxy. Its purpose was to finally answer the question that had haunted the Concordance since humans first made contact. What exactly were they? The answer, it turned out, was simple. So simple that it had taken some of the greatest minds in existence far too long to see it.
Humans were chaos. Not destructive chaos, though they were capable of that. Not random chaos, though they often seemed unpredictable. Humans were creative chaos, the kind of entropy that led not to dissolution, but to novelty. They were the cracks in perfectly ordered systems through which new life could grow. They were the mutations that evolution required to adapt. They were the unexpected variables that prevented stagnation from becoming extinction.
And more than that, humans were afraid.
They were afraid of death, though they could not avoid it. They were afraid of pain, though they could not escape it. They were afraid of loss, though they loved anyway. They were afraid of the vastness of the universe, though they reached for the stars. They were afraid, constantly and perpetually and inescapably afraid, and yet they continued forward. They loved and fought and dreamed and created, all while carrying the weight of their fear on their shoulders.
This, the report concluded, was the source of their power. Not technology, not military might, not population or resources or strategic position. Humans were powerful because they were afraid and acted anyway, because they were mortal and loved anyway, because they were small and fragile and cosmically insignificant, and yet they dared to believe that their choices mattered.
The report ended with a recommendation, unanimously endorsed by every species that had contributed to it.
Do not try to make humans less afraid.
Do not try to make humans less chaotic.
Do not try to make humans more like us.
Instead, let us learn from them. Let us remember what it was like to feel. Let us remember what it was like to fear. Let us remember what it was like to be alive, truly, fully, passionately alive, in a universe that would one day claim us all.
Let us be brave.
In her room at the human embassy, Lily Zhang slept the sleep of children everywhere, deep and peaceful, filled with dreams of rabbits and butterflies and adventures yet to come. On her nightstand, The kaleidoscope sat silent and ordinary, its moment of cosmic significance long past. But sometimes when the light hit it just right, the patterns inside seemed to move with a purpose. They seemed to form shapes that might be letters, or might be faces, or might be nothing at all.
And if you listened very closely, if you held your breath and opened your heart and remembered what it was like to believe in impossible things, you might hear a voice that sounded like the wind through crystal canyons, like the first note of a song that had been silent for 3,000 years, like the laughter of a child who had just taught the galaxy how to live.
The voice said, "Thank you."
And somewhere, in a dimension beyond human understanding, the keepers smiled their patterns and continued their eternal watch, knowing that their children, all their children, young and old, human and alien, were finally learning how to be brave.
The end.